The Archdiocese of Indianapolis is defending a school's decision to fire a married gay teacher. Cathedral High School officials say the Archbishop made clear it had to cut ties with the teacher or separate from the Catholic Church. A crowd gathered outside of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis yesterday to protest the firing.
One person should not be fired based on how they're born and how they live their life.
Students organized to press the church to change policies they say alienate certain people, but the Archdiocese stands by its decision, saying the policy applies to all of the schools under its umbrella, covering 38 counties and nearly 70 schools. Now, with us to talk about this is Steve Hennefeld. He's an education writer and former reporter. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joe.
So there are two schools in the headlines about this issue. How are each one are kind of dealing with this in a different way? How?
Well, two recent schools in the headlines, Rebuff Jesuit School declined to fire a teacher who was in the same-sex relationship, and as a result, their relationship with the Archdiocese of Indianapolis has apparently been severed. Cathedral High School complied with the expectation of the Archdiocese that they terminate or suspend, I believe terminate, a teacher in a same-sex marriage, and that's the expectation for schools in the Archdiocese. Rebuff is in a little different situation because it's a Jesuit high school, so it still has a religious affiliation, some would say a Catholic affiliation.
So schools under the Archdiocese receive a lot of funding from the state through vouchers, so they are in part publicly funded. Given that, do they have an obligation to serve everybody?
You know, that's really a good question and a good topic for argument. I would argue that schools that receive public funding have at least an ethical obligation to serve all of the public, including and to employ people who, you know, to not discriminate in their employment practices or in their enrollment practices. But the law does allow them to discriminate, in fact, even though they receive voucher funding.
So Catholic schools only got a portion of the $161 million in voucher funds that the state gave this year. Evangelical schools also get voucher funding. Can you tell me a little bit about those schools?
Yeah, I would say that the Catholic schools overall across the state get a majority of the funding. I think 92 million out of 161 million, 38 million in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. But there's a lot of funding also for evangelical schools, also for Lutheran schools. And, you know, there's not a central policy for those types of schools. Certainly some of the evangelical schools make it very explicit on their websites that they don't approve of homosexuality, they don't approve of same-sex marriage, of different gender identities, and they expect students and families, and I would assume also employees, to sign a statement of faith, typically a fundamentalist Christian faith, in order to participate in the school.
Very briefly here, is this something that's a state issue, or is this something that needs to be taken up in the religious sector?
I would argue it's a state issue. It's something the legislature has briefly tried to address, but chosen not to address. But the state is responsible for how state funds are spent, and there should be a real state discussion about whether this is appropriate.
All right, Steve, thank you very much for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.